Hi everybody, welcome back to IndyCar on the 28th of March 2019. Well, what can I say today about what happened yesterday in Parliament in Westminster? I mean, what can you say about that other than, well, it's completely underwhelming. I mean, we're being ruled by a bunch of people who couldn't really decide which way round to sit on a toilet seat. The whole of the Westminster Parliament seems to be paralysed by indecision and dithering. Nobody can decide what to do. Nobody can sort of rally round any particular idea. I mean, we went through all the motions of it yesterday, and the thing that got the most votes still failed. So even on its best day, with the best possible idea in the world for how to get out of the Brexit problem, less than half of Westminster actually supports the idea. So we can be pretty sure actually that what's going to happen next is a no-deal Brexit. And the reason we can be sure about that is that the European Union has now completed all of its no-deal Brexit preparations. Now, this is 28 other countries have now finished their preparations for the United Kingdom crashing out without a deal. And that tells you something, doesn't it? I mean, we're all sitting here in the United Kingdom being told and being led to believe that there's some way out of this this blind alley, this dead end that we have been brought to. But there isn't. There are only two doors at the end of this alley. One of them is a no-deal Brexit, and the other one is Mrs May's deal, which is locked tight shut by the DUP. So if you're using these analogies about doors and locks, the Democratic Unionist Party has locked the door to Mrs May's deal. We can't go through that. We can't have an orderly Brexit because 10 Northern Irish Unionists from the Stone Age won't let us. That's basically the size of it. Plus the fact that the British parties, and I use that term loosely, but what I really mean is the English parties, the Labour Party and the Conservatives, cannot agree on how to get out of Brexit. And not only that, but they don't actually want to get out of Brexit. Neither party wants Brexit to be stopped. If you look at the voting demographics for all of the votes yesterday, so all of the amendments that were or all of the ideas, the indicative votes that were suggested yesterday, every single one of them was pretty much unanimously voted against by the Conservative Party, except one, where I think only about 20, maybe something like that, Tory MPs actually crossed to the other side, to the lobby to join the rest of us. But it was only one item where they did that, and it was a very, very small denial, or not so much denial, but there was a very, very minor uprising by Tory MPs, a very tiny one. But that was it. So the bottom line is quite simple. The Tories want Brexit. In Scotland, every party at Holyrood, except the Tories, voted to stop Brexit, to revoke Article 50. Every single party in Scotland, except the Conservative Party, wants Brexit stopped. So 20% of Scotland wants Brexit to happen, and 80% or thereabouts of Scotland doesn't. And yet we're still being forced out. So at the end of this week, it doesn't matter what happens now. We've now got, 12 days, in which if no other decisions are made, Brexit isn't revoked, or there isn't a longer delay asked for, they will just simply fall out of Europe, basically like a drunk crashing out a fire door and down the back steps onto the back alley. We will have no control over what happens after that, none whatsoever. I think it's interesting actually that the SNP has bought 2 freight ships, 2 big supply ships, as well as 2 ferries recently. They've actually purchased these. I've never known the Scottish Government to buy 2 ships before, have you? I mean, why did they buy 2 ships unless they really thought that we were going to need them to bring food or medical supplies from Europe into Scotland? One of my Facebook friends yesterday, when I brought up this business of these ships that have been purchased, was pointing out to me they're not intended for use to supply Shetland and Orkney. That would be done by the ferries. These 2 ships, these are medium-sized freighters. They're designed to cross the North Sea to Europe to pick up supplies of food, medicines, equipment, and bring them to Scotland in the event of a no-deal Brexit, because that's really what that's about. Scotland's preparing for a no-deal Brexit as well, I think. But gradually, this whole process, if you look at all of the events that have happened in the last few months, gradually all the other possibilities, the other doors to different futures have been slammed shut by either the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, or the Speaker. Now, I mention the Speaker deliberately because John Bercow has behaved rather oddly. I mean, he deliberately slowed Brexit down the other week by saying that Mrs May couldn't bring her deal back for a third reading without a substantial change to it. Now, that really is just a parliamentary tradition that you don't come back with the same argument twice unless you've tweaked it a bit. But actually, he could easily just have not said that and just allowed it to happen. But he didn't. He insisted on slowing it down a bit more, and then he slowed it down a bit more again. Now, why did he do that? He didn't need to do it. It wouldn't have made any difference to the way things panned out. And as far as I can see, Mrs May is hell-bent determined to bring this vote back for a third time tomorrow. She's going to try one last time to get somebody to vote for it. The Democratic Unionists have said they'll never vote for it, but that's exactly the sort of thing the Democratic Unionists do. They like to sabotage any chance of progress at the last minute and hold everybody to ransom, and they've done that repeatedly in Northern Ireland as well. It's a way of halting progress and preventing any movement from the past to the future. They want to live in the past, and they don't want a future to happen. But does it make any difference to what's going to happen next? Well, actually, I don't think so. I think that the Tories and the Democratic Unionists, Jeremy Corbyn and John Bercow and most of the Labour Party are all playing their parts in this pantomime. It's a very deliberate act to make it look as if there has been a battle going on for control over the Parliament, over how Brexit happens and all the rest of it. But it's nothing. It really is just a huge charade. Nothing in it means anything. And nothing that happens in Parliament will affect Brexit in any way, shape or form. We're either, and very unlikely incidentally, but we're either going to get Mrs May's deal, which looks to me like a dead duck. I mean, it looks completely deceased. I don't see anybody voting for it. But the most likely thing is they'll put it to Parliament again tomorrow in the hope that perhaps it might squeak through by one vote. I don't think it will. I don't think anyone else thinks it will. But they're going to go through the motions anyway, and at the point where it fails, Mrs May is going to resign. And when Mrs May resigns, the Tory party has to come up with a new leader and a new plan very quickly. Personally, I think they'll come up with a new Brexiter as their leader and an entire cabinet made up of Brexit supporters. And they're going to allow us just to crash out without a deal, which I believe is always the intention to do. And the reason I think that is because I said this a long time ago, it makes the most sense to me that if you are going to crash out of Europe and take the entire country out, that you would want to have full control of particularly all your assets. And the biggest asset to England at the moment is Scotland, because Scotland has the geographic 90% share of oil and gas. It has all the whisky revenues. It has most of the exporting surpluses of the United Kingdom, and it's the jewel in the crown, really. If you're going to crash out of Europe and you need somebody to help you get through it, Scotland would be the one that you'd want to take with you. And the only way that the Brexiters can really take Scotland with them is by force. And the only way they can really do that is if Scotland doesn't have a chance to break free. And the best way of ensuring that is for us to crash out of Europe without a deal, completely by accident, apparently, and then for there to be a period of national emergency in which any laws, which as Martin Keating's pointed out today, any laws which have been touched by European Union legislation can then be abolished by the English Parliament and replaced with something more to their liking. So that would mean all of the underpinnings of devolution could be swept away completely under these Henry VIII emergency powers. But basically, these are the powers that are a part of the withdrawal deal. And this is a blank cheque for any English government to do whatever the hell it likes during this period of emergency, which they have provoked deliberately. People who think that a no-deal Brexit would happen accidentally are kidding themselves on. The no-deal Brexit is definitely being planned. Nothing like this has happened accidentally. All these strange coincidences that have gradually shut the door on every other possible outcome are not coincidences. These have been planned all along. John Berco's intervention will have been planned months in advance. Jeremy Corbyn's pronouncements on what he wants, these pointless ideas that he's had that could never happen, these have been rehearsed and put in place months in advance as well, so that it looks as though the Labour Party is making some kind of token effort at opposing the Tories, but it's not really opposing them at all, because Labour, just as the Conservatives do, wants power, and even in the midst of a Brexit emergency, the Labour Party is still keen to have control over the United Kingdom and have power, because the Labour Party is a part of the political establishment in the same way that the Conservatives are part of the political establishment. When Ian Blackford was interviewed 2 days ago by Channel 4, and he looked visibly shaken because he had been told in the Privy Council what the ramifications of a no-deal Brexit would be for Scotland. He was absolutely shaken up by what it meant for Scotland, and he said as much. He couldn't give any details, but he was visibly shaken by what he had heard. Now, a man like Ian Blackford doesn't get upset easily. I'm sure he has seen a lot of things in his time as a politician that have probably given him cause for concern, but this, I think, is different. The Privy Council, as we all know, is the private council which used to advise the monarch on how to deal with international dealings. But in this case, the Privy Council is now no longer advising the Queen. It is just a cabal, a secret cabal of the top politicians in the UK. And it's that top cabal that form the political establishment that runs the UK. And they agree between them. I'm talking about Jeremy Corbyn, Vince Cable, whoever happens to be in charge of the parties at the time. So the Lib Dems, the Labour Party, and the Tories. And now, to some extent, the SNP have got a toe in the door as well, although I'm pretty certain they're not going to have any influence in the Privy Council, but they will hear what's going on. And because they hear what's going on, we know that Nicola Sturgeon will know exactly what's going to happen next, and she'll know when it's going to happen, because when you've got somebody in the Privy Council like Ian Blackford, who is the SNP's leader at Westminster, they have to be told under the rules of the Privy Council what is happening and what the political establishment which runs the UK is wanting to do. And I am willing to bet a humongous amount of money that the British establishment is wanting a no-deal Brexit, because it greatly simplifies the power structure of the United Kingdom after Brexit. They knew that Brexit was going to potentially break up the United Kingdom. They knew the Irish problem was going to be the sticking point. They knew that Scotland would want independence. And the only way that they can avoid those two problems is to force a no-deal Brexit on everybody. That way they can then transfer the blame for that to the European Union and say, the bad European Union was intransigent, they wouldn't move and give us what we wanted, therefore it's not our fault that there's a massive wall being built across Ireland. That's all to do with the Europeans. And it's not our fault that Scotland has no chance of independence. We need control over the Scottish oil fields to survive after a no-deal Brexit. So the whole thing really is, in my view, looking at everything that's happened in the last 3 years, from the moment that the deal was done, the moment that vote came through in June in 2016, we knew what was going to happen, that we were going to leave the European Union. It didn't matter what else happened, that the Tories would take us out. Because even though we think the Tories are actually split on the subject of Europe, they're not that split. All they're doing really is they're splitting on what kind of Brexit it is. They all want it. I mean, you just look at the way they voted yesterday and you'll see that all of the no's down the right-hand side of the column are all in blue. Virtually every single majority against doing something better than Brexit, or no Brexit, or delaying Brexit. All of it was opposed by the Tories, all of them. There was only one item actually on that list where one or two Tories jumped ship. And even that just showed that mostly the Tories are for Brexit, and mostly the Labour Party is for Brexit as well. It just has to pretend not to be, so that it looks like it's fighting for people's rights and keeping things on the straight and narrow and trying to protect jobs, etc. But they can't. Brexit doesn't protect jobs. Brexit kills jobs. That's what it does. These car companies in the northeast of England and central England and the Midlands, they'll all be going because there's no money to be made in manufacturing foreign cars in the United Kingdom if they can't be sold into Europe without taxes. They will just simply move those car production plants into Europe. That's what businesses do. They adapt, they change. But we can't expect the workers in these factories to have their jobs saved by the government. It's not going to happen. So we're left with this now. We're in a situation where in about 12 days' time, Scotland will lose forever any chance of becoming independent, because as soon as Brexit happens, doesn't matter what kind of Brexit it is, but if it's a hard no-deal Brexit, then everything stops. 12 days from now, on the 12th of April, Scotland's devolution settlement could abruptly be suspended or abolished, just like that. All it takes is for Theresa May to lose her position as PM and for a hard right Brexit cabinet to be formed, and all of a sudden Scotland is annexed. Scotland becomes a resources area of the general United Kingdom, and Holyrood gets shut. And when it is shut, and they would shut it, believe me, they would shut it in the blink of an eye if they could. The Tories hate Holyrood, they hate it. They've always hated it. That's why they make fun of it and belittle it at every cut and turn. They hate it. They want it shut, and they'll shut it as soon as they get the opportunity, and that will be on the 13th of April. And when they do that, how is the SNP then going to hold a referendum when they have no parties, they have no access to the machinery of democracy? The local authorities, which normally would run ballots, will be being controlled by Westminster. Northern Ireland, we know they're going to take control of it directly, because there is no power sharing in Northern Ireland. It's been suspended for the last 2.5, 3 years, and that will continue. The DUP wants that. They want London rule. That's what they live for. In Scotland, we're going to have it imposed on us on the 13th of April. That's why Martin Keatings is right. That's why many other people who've said it's time to use the mandate are right now. There isn't anything else left on the table now. The chances of Brexit being called off, or no Brexit, are none, zero, because none of the English parties or establishment will permit it to happen. Brexit's a foregone conclusion. We've always been sliding down the hill towards it. All that's happened is we've been herded into smaller and smaller funnel, and eventually that funnel will end up with just one exit, which will be a no-deal Brexit, because that's the one that's least problematic for the Tories to manage. They talk about a managed no-deal. Have you heard that term? You'll hear it more and more frequently now. We're going to have a managed no-deal. They make it sound as if it's all going to be terribly well organised. It won't be. Partly because they don't care what happens to you, and partly because it doesn't affect them in any way at all, because they've all got private medical care, and they've all taken up foreign citizenship in other European countries, so that they, if they have a problem with getting drugs, can simply get them through their European contacts. Won't touch them. But the rest of us will be thrown under the bus. So, what's required at the moment now is for the SNP to come out and say that there is going to be a referendum, not a Section 30 order referendum, but an advisory referendum, legally constituted, at Holyrood, voted through, the process begun, and the machinery for that set out. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's blockchain voting or whether it's paper voting, but I believe that we have to be very careful about things like postal votes. That means maybe not have any at all, but have a different system. But it needs to be set up, and there needs to be a date set for it. And that date needs to happen. We need to have the democratic right to hold this ballot before the Tories can seize control, before the Brexiteers can depose May and take control of the United Kingdom and take control of Scotland directly. We have to act before that. There are only 12 days to do it. 12 days, and that is it. Because if they don't come up with something in 12 days that will satisfy the European Union to give them a longer extension, then all bets are off. We're out the door, and on the 13th of April, well, you can wave bye-bye to your independence referendum, because there won't be a Holyrood left to decide upon it or to legislate for it. Because even if we have a non-binding referendum, the Scottish Parliament legally has to create legislation that allows that referendum to take place. In order for it to be legal, it has to be done by Holyrood. It can't be done by Westminster, who's not going to want it anyway. It has to be done by our Parliament. And if our Parliament only has 12 days left to live, then surely it's about time the SNP said, right, that's it, we're going to go now, because if we wait any longer, we will definitely lose. I mean, all this worry about losing this referendum because there's not sufficient support is really blown away by the whole idea that you can't have a referendum at all, ever, because the Tories are going to remove your Parliament. How are you then going to get your referendum? I mean, one or two people have actually written to me today and say, are you prepared to fight for it on the streets? And now that's a little bit of an overreaction, and nobody in this movement is proposing that. But it does sort of concentrate your mind a bit when you think about what could happen and what will happen. Is the Tories definitely will seize power, because they don't have a choice. A no-deal Brexit means they need every single resource they can lay their hands on, and they need full control over how it's done, where it's done, and they need full control over the expenditure in every part of the UK, and they'll want that centralised. In an emergency situation, they need full control of everything, and that means centralised control of everything. In a dictatorship, which is what this will become, it is total control. Nothing else makes any sense. If you're going to provoke a state of emergency to seize control, you need to seize control of everything, every single part of your territory, if you want to call it that. So Scotland needs to be ready for this, and I think the SNP is preparing for a no-deal Brexit. Buying ships is a sure sign of it. The Scottish Government's never bought ships before, and it's never needed to buy ships before. To purchase 2 ferries to ensure that there's a lifeline between islands, that must mean they're worried that somehow or other the contracts they have at the moment with ferry companies are going to go in the bin, and there's going to be some problem with that. And the fact that they're buying freighters that are going to ply the route between Aberdeen and Denmark or Norway is very worrying indeed. That tells you that the SNP is anticipating having to bring goods from the other side of the North Sea directly to Aberdeen or to Leith or somewhere like that. That's quite concerning that they think they need these ships. But it's also reassuring that they're on top of it and they know what the risks are. But we have to hear something. We must hear something by the 12th of April. Surely. How much longer is the SNP going to wait before they make a declaration? Nobody really needs to have an absolute definitive date. But if they said next month, in April, there will be a snap referendum on independence, for example, if they just said that and it's going to happen and not name the date, it is going to throw a big stick into the spokes of the UK bicycle, isn't it? And sticking a spoke in the wheels of Brexit is never a bad idea for Scotland. So that's where we're at today. As far as I can see, Mrs May will probably put her deal back to Parliament tomorrow, regardless of how unpopular it is. It will fail again, there'll be another uproar, and then there'll be a lot of flapping about, panicking, and the BBC interviewing itself constantly for days on end, and eventually we'll crash out of the EU and everybody will go, oh my goodness, how did that happen? What a coincidence that we just happened to have fallen out of the European Union, we just happened to have lost Mrs May, and it just so happens that Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg and David Davis and John Redmond and all the rest of them have all formed a new cabinet and are taking us even further to the right and are about to abolish the Scottish Parliament and close down the Welsh Assembly. What a coincidence it'll all be, eh? That the whole thing will just be a colossal mass of coincidences that just happens to have accidentally happened. Well, none of it is happening by accident. We all know it's not an accident. This is what the Tories have wanted for the last 40 years. They've just been itching to do it. There were some people in the Tory party who genuinely thought at the beginning that being in the EEC was a good idea, and you could see that because Ken Clarke suggested a sort of, what would you call it, a kind of common market Mark II as one of the ideas that was put up yesterday. And even that's been shot down. They don't even want to trade with Europe as a sort of common market with no political membership at all. They don't even want to trade with them. That's how bad it is down in London, that they don't want to trade with Europe even. And if that's the case, then hard Brexit is the only option for you. You know, if you don't want to trade with Europe, what's the point of having any kind of organised Brexit? Why bother paying them any money at all? Why not just walk away and owe them billions? Do you know what? I have had enough. I'm not sure about you, but there's nothing much more to be said. You know, Scotland said its piece. We've said we don't want Brexit. We want it stopped. We've legislated for it. There's nothing left. Even the great Alan Smith in Europe, our SNP MEP, made a wonderful speech yesterday saying that he thought this would be the last speech he was going to make to the European Parliament before we are unceremoniously dumped out of Europe. And not only that, but he said that you need to leave the light on for us so that we can find our way back to Europe again, which tells you that the SNP knows that we'll be out of Europe. Well, we have to be. If you Brexit with the UK, you're out of Europe with them. We have to reapply to get back in, and it will probably take us about a year and a half at the least. So it would be a year and a half trying to get back into the European Union. In that year and a half, we have to be able to supply the country with food and whatever we need, hence the need for ships, I guess. It's a mess. I mean, people say we live in interesting times. At the moment, no. We live in crazy, crazy times where an alien ideology... I mean, you've heard the British talk about the alien ideology of ISIS. Well, I'm talking about the alien ideology of the Tory Brexiteers. It's an ideological, racist hatred of everybody in Europe. They just don't like Europe. They don't like what it stands for. They don't like the languages. They don't like the people. They don't like the institutions. They don't want to obey any rules set by Europe. Basically, Britain wants to just rule everybody else and thinks it's somehow exceptionally good and better than everyone else. And believe it or not, the UK government, like America, is quite happy to flout international law when it doesn't suit them. I mean, you've heard of the International Court of Justice. Well, the UK government pays no attention to that at all. It doesn't matter what the International Court of Justice at the United Nations decides. The UK says it doesn't apply to us because we're exceptional. Americans are the same. It's very clear to me that the United Kingdom, as it is, in other words, England wants to be part of America and part of Israel. That's the way they're lining things up. They want to be a part of an axis between America, England and Israel. That's the way it's being set up. And the rest of us have no choice in the matter. Well, I beg to differ, and I think we've got a lot of choice. And if Alan... what's his name? Oh God, too many names swirling around in my head. But the SNP is going to make a move. They know what's going on. They have to know. Ian Blackford was in the Privy Council. He knows what the future is. He's seen into the crystal ball. We haven't. But you can tell from the shock on his face that what he's seen is very, very unpleasant for Scotland. So we have to see some action. I anticipate an announcement any day now, because I don't think there's any options left in the UK. It doesn't matter now what they do in Parliament. They can't decide on anything. And Mrs May's about to resign. And if Mrs May resigns, it'll either be a general election where we get Jeremy Corbyn, the Brexiteer, in charge of a new Brexit plan, which hasn't been organised yet, or Mrs May gets booted out and we get a hard right taking us to a hard Brexit. I mean, it's a Hobson's choice. You get a slightly bad Brexit, or you get an absolutely bloody awful Brexit. But either way, you get Brexit no matter what you do. And that's what Britain is about at the moment. That's why we can't be members of it. 80% of Scotland doesn't want to leave the European Union. 80% of the MSPs in Holyrood voted against leaving the European Union and said that we should revoke Article 50. Scotland believes that Brexit shouldn't happen. Only the Tories in Scotland, only them, that tiny, less than a fifth of the population, actually want Scotland to be wrecked by their Brexit. For their own ends, presumably, because it's not for anybody else's benefit. Only that tiny proportion of Scottish people actually want Scotland trashed so that it stays a part of the UK. And this is the unionist mindset. They would rather die in a ditch wrapped in a union flag than be wealthy and free to make their own decisions. That's a sickness. That's a mental illness when you think like that. I'm off. I'm going to go and do some real work now. I'll be reading the news tonight on Scotland at 7 on Broadcasting Scotland. And it's going to be one of those news broadcasts where I'll be reading out a lot of nonsensical crap about what happened in Westminster. But hopefully we'll also be reporting on a lot of good, positive news stories from Scotland. The only sensible, right-thinking country in this union of two that we're a member of. But we are the sane half of this bipolar Britain that we live in at the moment. And I think it's time that the good bit of it, Scotland, made its choice. And I think it's up to the SNP. They've got to move on this. Does it not seem to you? I mean, maybe it's just me, right? But think about the situation we've got at the moment. Two powerful women are making decisions about two countries here at the moment. Mrs May holds the future of Scotland and the United Kingdom in the palm of her hand, and Nicola Sturgeon holds the entire future of Scotland in her hand, and we're both waiting for both these people to make decisions. Not because, I'm not saying it's because they're women or anything like that, I'm just saying that these two women both have this power, and the rest of us are standing around waiting for these two people to make a bloody decision about something, and they just won't. You know, even Mrs May just cannot even decide whether to resign or not. She still wants to flog the dead horse of the Brexit deal of hers that nobody likes. And Nicola, we don't know what she's thinking. All we know is she's hanging fire and hanging fire and hanging fire and hanging fire. She can't wait much longer. You wait any longer, and how are we going to hold a referendum? Because you won't have anything to hold it with. You know, Holyrood will be gone, and then, you know, this wait till you see the whites of their eyes stuff is going to be completely moot, really, isn't it? Because we'll have lost any chance of even holding a referendum, never mind losing it. We won't even have been able to fight it. We need to fight it, and we need to start fighting it soon, very soon, 12 days from now and counting. And I'll be counting the days down, actually, over the next few Indy cars in order to try and keep the SNP focused, at least, on timing this right, because I honestly don't think you can wait much longer now. I mean, how much longer do we need to wait? I mean, does Nicola know something we don't? Is the UK going to negotiate with Scotland so that Scotland can go its separate way? Well, if it is, I wish they'd bloody say so. Why are we all being kept on tenterhooks like this? All these poor people who need their medicines to survive, they're all scared to death. You know, people are going to die if they don't get their insulin. They're going to be in great pain if they don't get the medicine that controls it. What's happening? When are we going to find something out? I mean, surely our own politicians owe us that, at least. A wee snippet here and there just to keep us up to date on where they're at. But no, all this silence, it's killing us. I'm off. See you later.